Hi, I'm Matt from Mud and Blood, a podcast dark and grim, and I'm here after a long delay to finally do the visual review for Call of Cthulhu 7th Edition, one of the heavyweights of the tabletop role-playing game world. Before I get into it, though, there's a few things to get out of the way. First of all, apologies that it's taken so long to get out. There have been a lot of personal circumstances that have come up preventing me from recording until now. Hopefully after today I'll be caught up. Second of all, this is not a full review of the game. If you're coming here looking for a review of Call of Cthulhu 7th Edition, you've come to the wrong place. However, we have done over a 2-hour review of this game. It's just in an audio-only format, not in a video. This video is to accompany our full audio review, because in the full audio review we talk about visuals, and obviously our listeners can't see what we're talking about. So that's the purpose of this video. If you want to go find the full 2-hour plus review of Call of Cthulhu that we've made, it's over at mbcast.co/50. And spoiler alert, it's the highest game we've ever reviewed. So we think very highly of it. Yeah, but this visual review I'm going to do now, I'm basically just going to be talking about the visual elements, like what you get in a physical product, what it looks like, some examples of some images, exactly the things that we've talked about in our full review. So that out of the way, let's get started. Oh, one more thing to mention as well is that I'm not just going to be talking about this Keeper rulebook, which is kind of the main book you would need to run a Call of Cthulhu game. I'm also going to be talking about the starter set, which is this one here. And the reason I'm not mentioning anything else is because from a visual perspective, most of the other products by Chaosium follow the same format as the Keeper's rulebook here. I'll start with this one now. So as you can see here, you can probably tell from by looking at it that it's a standard role-playing game format. It's hardback letter format book. That means it's 8.5 inches wide by 11 inches tall. In metric money, that is 28 centimeters by 21.5 centimeters. Hardback, as I said, it's matte. It's got a matte finish. It's not glossy. It has a red ribbon as well as red head and what are these called? Footbands, headbands and footbands that match the ribbon, which is a nice little touch. It's got an oversewn binding, which you come to expect in a high quality tabletop role-playing game that's hardcover, with a flat spine. I don't think there's much else to talk about with this, other than what I'm going to be showing when I put it down on my desk in a few minutes to show you the full book. It's worth mentioning that most of the at least all the hardcover books that I've come across for Call of Cthulhu line follow this format in terms of size, matte hardcover finishes. Even the red ribbon, they all have a red ribbon. And when I say all, the ones that I've come across actually on my shelf right now are the Investigator's Handbook, Pulp Cthulhu, Down Darker Trails, and Shadows Over Stillwater. So I've picked up quite a few Call of Cthulhu books, not by all means all of them, but they all follow that format, and I would assume most, like all the other hardcover all the other hardcover products do as well. Anyway, so that's the Keeper rulebook. Let's put that to one side. I mentioned the starter set before, and here it is. It has a really nice cover. It's also got a matte finish on it. It actually comes in a box, so this is a lid which does open. Anyway, it's not got a hinge on it or anything. It's basically just the top of the box just fits over the bottom half. In terms of format and size, I haven't actually measured it, but it looks like it's about an inch taller, roughly an inch, maybe slightly bigger than an inch taller than the letter format, and about like a third of an inch, half an inch wider. This is worth pointing out because if you do buy this and you want to put it on your shelf, it will stack next to the books, but it's significantly taller. So if you haven't got very tall shelves, just be aware that this might not fit. Inside the book, the starter set, I've already taken the inserts out, we get quite a lot of goodies. The first 3 books are books 1, 2, and 3. They all have these red covers, and they are Alone Against the Flames, which is a solo adventure, introductory rules, which are basically the quick start, chopped down versions of the rules, and Paper Chases and Other Adventures, which are 3 adventures to be run after you've done the solo adventure. All 3 of these books are also in letter format, and they're all paperback. And when I say paperback, they actually don't have card covers like often like paperbacks do. It's exactly the same glossy paper that is on the inside that make up the actual product. So just be aware that these are slightly flimsier. You need to have a bit more care when you're handling them. In terms of a spine, they are all stapled with 2 staples. So, it's not... they've not gone for really robust, particularly high quality on these books, but that does keep the price down, and it does mean that they can put a lot of product in here for not a lot of money. The next booklet is this little booklet here, and it's called Keeper References. It also follows the same format of having glossy pages where the interiors are the same quality as the front covers. This is actually quite a useful set of tables because you have 15 pages of basically cheat sheet tables for running a Call of Cthulhu game, not just applicable to the starter set. And the back, let's see, probably about 8 pages or so, has 2 indexes. The first index is for the Keeper rulebook, so if you want to look stuff up and you have the Keeper rulebook, it'll tell you where to find it. And also it has an index for the Investigator's Handbook, which I think is really, really cool to have. So this Keeper's References is actually really good, really useful. And if you never buy the GM screen, or you don't think you need the GM screen, the GM screen, by the way, is also an excellent product. But this has a lot of reference material, which is useful to any keeper of Call of Cthulhu. Next up, we have character sheets. You get 5 pre-gens, which have a nice image in the corner here, like this, that can be used in the adventures in the starter set. And you also get 4 blank character sheets, which can be used to create your own characters. Those are double-sided, letter format. You also get a bunch of handouts. A lot of them are in this another booklet, same quality in terms of glossy paper, etc. You will have to cut them all out, so something to be aware of. It does have the slight downside that some handouts, like let's look at this page for example. You've got a handout at the top and a handout on the bottom. Now you would think, okay, no problem. I cut this page out, cut it in half, and then I can hand this physically to my players. Well, that's all well and good, but you're going to be cutting the next handout in half. So I'm not sure why they've done this. Same here, you've got 3 handouts on one page. The bottom 2 are separate like this. If you were to cut those all out individually, which you would have to do really, you'd be cutting this one in half. So not all of these handouts technically would be usable. Even if they were usable, my players, they would, if I handed them a physical handout, they would probably look on the back of it and be like, okay, now you're looking at, I'm giving you 2 handouts when I'm only supposed to be giving you 1. So just be aware this might have limited use in practice because you probably want to use the PDF to print your own handouts out. Something to be aware of. The other 2 handouts are maps, and they're single. They're not in a booklet. They're loose leaf, but they're basically maps. One is like regional maps. Well, one's a regional map, one is a location map, and the other 2 are building maps. And those are all tied to the adventures that come in the book. And finally, making up the last bit of the starter set are a bunch of full-size maps. We get 1 map of the world, kind of the Cthulhu world. So you have the full world on here. It shows you not only real-world cities, but it also shows you mysterious locations, which are places like the Bermuda Triangle, Shambhala in the Himalayas, etc. And then you also get a bunch of mythos sites, which I'm not going to attempt to pronounce because they're not meant to be pronounced, and they are... Well, here's one, Irem. Didn't look too hard to pronounce. Anyway, so that's kind of nice, where you can kind of see where some of these things are located, rather than just saying it's in the Himalayas or it's in Siberia somewhere. You can kind of see on a map roughly where that is exactly. Next up, they zoom in on Lovecraft Country, and we can see all of the kind of fictional places in and around Boston, Massachusetts, that Lovecraft created for his works. So you've got down here, you've got Boston. Going north from Boston, you've got Arkham, which is kind of like an entire view of Massachusetts. And here you have basically along the coast places like Ipswich, Innsmouth is on there, Rockport. I don't actually know if all of these are made up. Kingsport, I know is fictional. Anyway, places like that. So this is quite useful to have if you're running scenarios that are in typical Lovecraft country. And last but not least, we have a map of Arkham, Massachusetts. This is the iconic large town that many of Lovecraft's stories are set in and many Call of Cthulhu scenarios go to. So this is kind of like a street map, like a tourist map, you could say, other than... It's not really a tourist map because you've got all these kind of scary imagery of the Cthulhu mythos around the side, but the actual map itself does look that way. It has road names on it. It has 4 little zoomed-in sections of downtown, French Hill, Northwest Merchant District, and the Miskatonic campus. And that makes up our visual review, first element of our visual review, which is the outside of the products. I'll now be moving across to my desk where I'll show you both of those products by opening them up and showing you what the artwork looks like, the layout, that sort of thing. So yeah, let's go do that right now. Okay, so we're going to start with the Keeper rulebook here when we're looking at the actual interior of the book in more detail. We have here the Keeper rulebook. This is the main one I'm going to be looking at, but I will show a comparison of layouts with the other Call of Cthulhu products that I have, so you can kind of see how it changes with the different editions. So the first thing to really talk around is let's talk number of pages. We flick to the back here. You can see there's some advertisements on the last few pages, followed by an appendix. This appendix is actually the final one in the book. Isn't an index, it's a list of names, and these are actually Kickstarter backers that go on for many, many pages. And in fact, I really like this at the back of the book because you could use this as an NPC, a quick NPC name generator. Just flick to one of the pages at the back, pick a number at random. Here we have Neil Green, for example. Neil Green. Good sounding name for a 1920s investigator, perhaps. Anyway, you can see page number wise here, it goes to 445, and then there's a few other extra pages here, so 448 pages going to this last page. So quite a hefty volume, really. End papers, we have H.P. Lovecraft with an illustration of him with some alien text scribbled very, very small in the around him, and that same image mirrored on this cover. Okay, so paper quality. Other than the end papers, which obviously are thicker card, the paper quality is actually fairly thin. You can see as I'm holding it up, you can kind of see through to the other side. So while the paper quality is perhaps not the thickest I've come across in role-playing game books, it is actually very high quality. It's got a satin sheen to it, almost glossy but not quite, and does feel fairly high quality. And in fact, having it that thinner quality and being 400 odd pages means that it's not actually a super thick volume, which I think is a good decision to kind of keep the cost of the final volume down. Layout wise, I'm going to flick to a page here to kind of talk through all the various elements. This is a good example here. So first thing to talk around are the backgrounds. The backgrounds follow a very similar theme across all the Call of Cthulhu books, although they do shake it up a bit. And I'll show you that at the end of this video. I'll show you a comparison of all the various different ones. Here in the Keeper rulebook, we have an off-white background, which has a sort of distressed corners on the bottom left and right. The detail of this distressing is it changes in various chapters of the book. You can see right here, for example, this graphic is slightly different, and that does change throughout the book. Sometimes it goes slightly different in color. You can see this one here is a bit more of a grayish color. Anyway, this one's also looks a bit more like this chapter 2 that I'm looking at here. Anyway, so that's kind of the background. You do get an occasional tentacle, which comes into play here. Sorry, this is chapter 3, not chapter 2. And if you look across the corners here, the tentacle graphic does occasionally change, and it does crop up kind of, as far as I can tell, randomly. Although there might be some sort of hidden meaning as to why it appears. I'm not really sure. Across the top, we have a line going across the entire spread. Call of Cthulhu on the left, and on the right, the chapter number and name. The other thing to talk around is chapter starts. Each chapter in the Keeper rulebook starts with a 2-page illustration, full-color illustration, spread across the 2 pages. It has as you can see, the chapter name, chapter number, and then a quote from one of Lovecraft's works. It's then followed in the chapter itself by this thing here, which is called a dropped capital or a drop cap or an initial, depending what you want to call it. And in fact, this specific one is called a historiated initial, which just means it's not just the first letter of this section being capitalized. It actually contains a picture as well. Anyway, that's in every chapter. It looks like that. Also in the Investigator's Handbook, they do exactly the same thing, although the graphic looks a little bit different. Let's see, what else can we talk about? Call-out boxes. Call-out boxes vary throughout the book. A lot of them look like this. These ones are for optional rules or additional rules clarifications. You have this kind of tentacled border at the top and bottom. Sometimes it has this notebook graphic, sometimes it doesn't. And it usually has this kind of notebook-styled like parchment color as a background. It stands out, as you can see, really well from the rest of the text, really easy to see. We occasionally get some of these like torn-out bits from a notebook with some scribbling in them. And then for examples in the book, when they're giving a practical example, they use this kind of call-out box. It looks very different. It still stands out from the text, but it looks very different. A lot of the images are contained within what I would consider like a call-out box, in that it has this kind of this white frame around it, which is shadowed to make it stand out, rather than being, you see sometimes illustrations inserted within the text and the text wraps around it. That's not the case here. We do have illustrations. We'll talk about illustrations a bit later, but there are some full-size illustrations, full-page illustrations as well throughout the book. I'll find some in a second. And I think that's really I want to talk about. Tables, I guess we can bring up tables. There's a table here, actually. Tables tend to be in call-out boxes, like this one here. And the rows are separated with alternating shading in the rows. That just makes them really easy to read. That's pretty much a standard thing. There's nothing really much more to say about the tables other than they're easy to read. Often they are within the column in this two-column format. By the way, the two-column format extends throughout the book. Although at the back in the appendix, one of the appendices, they do have lots of tables. Some of them, as you can see, are full page, like single column. Vehicle reference charts kind of is 2 columns. Here's another one that's a full column layout for a table. Other forms of damage that table. Anyway, so that's kind of how the tables work. We talk about the appendices. Let's actually look at the appendices, because there's a lot of them here. I'll just flick them very, very quickly. It's a whole chapter of appendices. Oh, and I just ripped my book. Okay, we have a glossary at the front, which is a glossary of terms. We have the second one is how to convert to the 7th edition rules. The third one is equipment lists. Now this is where it also breaks up the 2-column format. You can see that there's a 3-column format here, but that's fine because it's basically just giving you costs of things. And for that, you don't need a wider format. This 3-column format fits quite well. So they're able to squeeze in both the 1920s and modern day kind of standard prices for things. We get a table here, which is weapon stats, which goes across several pages. Kind of interesting, Call of Cthulhu isn't really considered a game about combat, but there's a lot here to kind of break up the stats for various weapons, which is kind of nice to see. We get a summary of the game system rules, summary of melee combat, combat flowcharts, summary of the chase rules, summary of the sanity rules, including the tables for bouts of madness, summary of the magic rules, a quick reference chart for the half and fifth values, and then eldritch words. So basically unusual words that Lovecraft used. It says here, a word of caution, reading the entire list causes 1d3 sanity loss. Let's pick one at random. Dunk. Corpulent. Okay, I've heard that used before. Then we get the indices. We have a standard index which talks around the various rules, where you can find the various rules. Then we get a table index, which gives you where all the various tables are. We get an index of other useful information, things like the flow charts, glossaries of terms, etc. Where the rule summaries are kept, where the mythos tomes are. I think they're all in one chapter, actually, so it's a bit odd to see this as an index, but anyway, it makes it easy to find them, I guess. Occult books, spells, alien artifacts, mythos monsters, mythos deities, traditional horrors like ghosts, mummies, and skeletons, and then beasts. Then we get 2 maps, various character sheets, 1920s and modern day, and then we get who the playtesters were, and then this 5-column, several pages of all the Kickstarter backers. So that is the layout those are the appendices. That's it basically in a nutshell. A quick word about the artwork then. You've probably seen it as I've been flicking through here. It's a mix of styles. We have some photographs, as you can see here. There are illustrations as well, as you can see here. Most of them are in full color. I believe all of them are new for this edition. They haven't recycled any art from previous editions. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong about that, but that's what I understand. And as I said before, most of them are in these sort of call-out boxes with a white frame. The difference is where this kind of doesn't follow suit is here in this chapter about the bestiary, basically different beasts and alien gods. And in here, these are basically monochrome images. We get a kind of two different images here showing the various elder gods and their size comparison to humanity. Then we get the actual monsters themselves, and they all follow this format, which is, as I was saying before, a more traditional format. They're within the text. The text flows around it, and they're all in this kind of sepia monochrome illustration style. Quite a sketchy style, I should say. So here's one with 3 images across the spread, so you can see that. They all follow the same look, so I would assume they're all done by the same artist, though I'm not 100% sure, but they do definitely follow the same style. So I quite like that. I quite like how the bestiary has these images in there, and that they are kind of sketched rather than really highly detailed illustrations. So I won't go through the whole thing. It's quite a big chapter, and there's quite a lot in here, as you can see. I did mention full-page artwork, so here's another map. In fact, this map is also in the appendix, but they do have some. Here's one. They do have some full-page illustrations throughout the book, and here's just an example of one. So it's there. It's in the middle of a chapter. It's not the start of a new chapter or anything like that. And that's just also a nice touch. They've included an awful lot of artwork in this book. Okay, so that's this book. I'm going to flick back to. I apologize for bumping the camera there. I'm going to show you now, before I show you a bit more of detail of the starter set, I'm going to make a comparison here and show you the other Call of Cthulhu products. At least the other Call of Cthulhu products that I own. So, accompanying the Keeper rulebook is the Investigator's Handbook. And layout-wise, I've put a ribbon, used the ribbons on all of these. Let's just have a quick look at how they compare. So, this is the start of a new chapter. Just like in the Keeper rulebook, the chapter starts with a full-page illustration. Then we have this exact same historiated initial, which is like basically a drop cap at the start of every chapter. It's a bit bigger than in the Keeper rulebook, but it's still the same. They have the same graphic across the top in terms of this line, although I didn't mention this before, but in the Keeper rulebook, we have in the top corner here, in fact, both of the top corners, there is this circular occult symbol, which is different for every chapter. That isn't in the top corners of the Investigator's Handbook. It's down here at the bottom in the center. So it's a very similar kind of layout. They've just mixed it up ever so slightly. We also don't have the distressed corners in the Investigator's Handbook like we do in the Keeper rulebook here. But yeah, and the other thing to point out is that the color of the background is slightly different. This is a bit more of a gray, parchmenty color. This is much more of a standard kind of yellowish parchment. You can see there's a table here which follows the same format in the Keeper rulebook. The call-out boxes look very similar. But then we have some other call-out box styles which don't appear in the Keeper rulebook. And these are these kind of tag-looking, this tag style, as you can see. So that is basically the Investigator's Handbook. Now we're going to look at Pulp Cthulhu. And the reason I'm bringing up Pulp Cthulhu is because the format in Pulp Cthulhu is also used in Down Darker Trails, which is the Western book, which I also have. It's also used in the Quick Start, and it's used in Alone Against the Dark, which is a paperback solo scenario that you can run. So this one actually is in use in a lot of their products. So I'm kind of curious as to whether this is their new kind of format going forward. I haven't seen many of their much newer products. I think Down Darker Trails is the newest one I have. Anyway, if I flick to my position here, Chapter 6. I've chosen this one specifically because you can see there is no artwork preceding this chapter. We go straight from Chapter 5 into Chapter 6. There's no 2-page or even single-page artwork. They do use some artwork like full-page artwork before some of the chapters I've seen, but not for all of them. So it's basically just where it fits. They've managed to. They've done that. Chapters start with this ribbon with the chapter number in it and then the title. We have a drop cap. It's not the historiated initial like we've seen in the other two books. And then the actual background is quite different. We have a black border going around the spread. And we have this, it looks like there's pages turned up. So it looks like you're reading a kind of an older, from an old notebook almost. We have this Art Deco style double line graphic across the bottom, this border. Also going across the top, it goes around the chapter number, the chapter name, and then the page numbers, which are in the center here. They still use these tentacled borders for their call-out boxes, although you can see the call-out boxes have lost the kind of heavy shadowed border that it's used previously. It's just basically inserted within the text, and the tentacled borders are used there. That's really all I wanted to say about that. It does have this a slightly distressed look to it in the background. It's not pure white or anything like that, or even just pure... like a manuscript color. It has these arcane symbols going down the left side, and on the right side we have an occult logo, or like a circular occult thing. And this does not change chapter by chapter like it does in the two core rule books. So while I keep Pulp Cthulhu open here, let me show you the Quick Start book, because the Quick Start book has exactly the same format, as you can see. It's got the same borders around the top and bottom. If I can pull up a table here. That's a handout. There we go. This one's obviously black and white, not in full color, but you can see it's got these the same graphics on the left. It's got this occult symbol on the right, and it's even got the tentacle border. So it's exactly the same format in the Quick Start Guide. And in Alone Against the Dark, we have exactly the same again. Also in black and white. And I'm not sure if this actually has tables, Alone Against the Dark. It might do more at the front. Because this is, because it's a solo adventure, there's no real need for lots of rules to be called out or anything like that. So anyway, and now I will show you. So that's the core rulebook and the main supplements. Now I'm going to show you a little bit more detail of the starter set. Okay, so here we have the starter set. I've taken the box away just because I want to focus on the content. On the left here, as I showed early on, are all the extra bits like the Keeper reference book, the handouts, the maps, character sheets, etc. We're not going to really look at those, so I'm just going to put them to one side. If we look at the books then, as I just showed with the Pulp Cthulhu supplements, this has exactly the same layout, so I don't really want to spend a lot of time talking about that. It has this the same borders, the same page background, the same call-out boxes. Everything is the same as in Cthulhu, the Pulp Cthulhu book. And as you can see here, we've got the same tentacled borders in a background which is kind of more of a digital graphic rather than looking like it's on a notebook in front of the text. In other words, like with a shadow around it, etc. So really, layout-wise, that's all I really wanted to show. It has full color throughout in the starter set. As you can see, there's picture of well, not picture, but there's images which are in full color. They follow the style of the Keeper rulebook, which is within this sort of like photograph graphic where you have a white border around it and some shadow. Yeah, and the only place this really mixes it up is in the third book, which is Paper Chase and Other Adventures, which are 3 scenarios. And in here, because it's a book of adventures or scenarios, there's obviously a lot more to do with things like graphics of enemies or adversaries. We've got maps or of locations, and there's just a lot more content in terms of imagery. We've got handouts because there's things like handouts and images that need to be shown to players. It tends to be a little bit more illustration heavy. So that's obviously a little bit of a disclaimer in terms of how it's laid out, but really it follows the same format. So that is it. There's not much else to say about the starter set, although I forgot to mention early on, you do get a full set of... I'm missing one here, actually. Which one am I missing? I am missing the D10. And here it is. It fell on the floor. So you get a D4, a D6, a D12, a D10, a percentile, D100, and a D20. There is no D8 in this set for some reason, but I guess D8s aren't used in this game. And that's it for the starter set. Just put the box up here again so you can see the reference. This is letter format. This is the size of the box. In fact, I'll just measure it just to be completionist. So it is roughly 12 inches tall by just over 9 inches wide, which in metric is probably about 31 centimeters. It's just larger than this ruler by 23 centimeters. So that is our Call of Cthulhu visual review. Thanks for watching. If you've got any questions, hit us up in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.